Hi, we're Nia and Marianne from Seren Health Coaching. We are metabolic health coaches who are passionate about good metabolic health for everyone. We also love to chat about all things health and to share as much information as we can with people who want to make changes to their lifestyle but aren't quite sure where to start. We're going to release a new episode every Friday where we talk about a different aspect of health. So do subscribe and let us know what you think. We'd also love to know what you're interested in too. So if there's something that you'd like us to have a chat about, do send us a message and we'll do our best to cover it soon.
Good morning, yeah, on the most beautiful day in the world down here, which I presume it's the same for you.
It is actually. It's very lovely today.
Yeah, it's almost, might I say, too hot for sun, but of course
Ooh,
I
do
love it.
not tempt it.
I love it. Some of my neighbours are cowering in darkened rooms because they've lived in this country all their lives, and this is very hot for us.
It is
But of
rather.
course, I grew up in the heat, so I love it. I think it's sort of what a bit like we're talking about today. It's it's a trigger in your brain for reminding you about things. So the heat actually triggers all this sort of nostalgia for me of home.
It's nice.
Anyway, that more of that later. I saw an interesting quote the other day, and I sent it to you. But do you
You did
think I
indeed.
can find it? I can't find it
Oh,
now.
do you want me to find it? I'll find it.
But it really resonated for both of us, didn't it? Because it was a lovely little quote
Mm,
about how easy it is to dream big and set goals because we're already good at this,
mm,
and how very often we fail because we
mm.
don't basically have any systems in place to get us there. So I know this is all very familiar and we've talked a lot about it, but I've got another little aspect and another little tool involved. Have you
Mm.
found it? I
Yeah,
couldn't.
no, I've looked for it and it's been deleted. So yes, I did.
Oh, it's
But
the
I
one
think it
that's
was.
deleted.
Yeah, I think it was the case, wasn't it, that it was all about you can set as many goals as you want, but unless you actually have systems in place
Yes.
to get you to the goals, you're not going to
Yeah.
do anything. And I
It
think
was
that's
it was
totally true.
basically very eloquently put, and I'd have liked to have used it, but anyway, it's got.
Yeah, sorry, mine wasn't very eloquent.
I did see a box that said, "This has been deleted." That was it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Um.
so absolutely, I
Yeah.
agree. It's totally true. You
Yeah.
can have all the goals in the world, but unless you
Yeah.
actually look at your life and say,
Yeah.
how am I actually going to get to that goal? You're not going to get there. So I love when we start coaching somebody and we talk about what their goals are, and obviously
Yeah.
they get
It's
very
fun.
excited and say, this is
Yeah.
what I want to do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I say, well, let's talk about how are you going to get there then? Because you can't just
No.
wish for something and it will happen. It's not a magic bean.
Yes. Exactly. Love that. And that isn't that health coaching in a nutshell.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Which is why, we have techniques where you have to speak to people personally, why you can't just say this is
Yes.
what you need to follow.
Yes.
Like the whole meal plan exercise regime thing
Yes.
never
God.
ever worked for anybody or for majority of people
No.
because
Well,
they're just
nobody.
simply doesn't
Yeah.
fit into their lifestyle.
Or they don't even understand it, like that thing they trot out in the NHS, which always drove me crazy, about how many minutes of exercise you have to do a week and whether it's moderate or
Or
all
intense
that
or yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that. Even for me, and I was the giver of such advice, I couldn't
Yeah.
make this relevant to anybody, literally
Yeah.
anybody, unless they were elite athletes in training.
Yeah.
Because you have, I mean, in a nutshell, coaching is about meeting people where they are and then facilitating their
Movement
progress to where they want to be. Isn't that really what health coaching is?
movement forward, I think it's never really, you
Yes.
don't necessarily always get them where they want to go, but you make them
No.
closer to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And actually there's no utopia. I also thought that.
And
So
that's
you
true,
never
yeah.
really get, because we've still got loads of goals up our sleeves, haven't we? Even you and I have
Oh,
been
yeah.
looking at goal setting for, it feels like 100 years now, but the whole thing of goal setting. But I'm sure we can talk about goals that we've still got up our sleeves because every time you, I don't know, get somewhere, there's somewhere else to go. Because
Mm.
basically life's always progressive. And so you might do some weights, but then you want to do more weights, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So why did I get excited about all this? I mean, this is very familiar ground and we've talked about it all before. And I'm the king of habits. I just love the whole science of habits. I never knew there was one. I found
Yeah.
all those books. I followed James Clear. He talks really eloquently about habits. But there's a whole sort of sphere of habits, routines, and rituals, and
Mm.
they're all part of the system that you have a choice. So they're in that sort of, I hate the word toolbox, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You can use all of these, and they have overlaps, obviously.
Yeah. Okay. So goal setting is where we've always talked about. We've
Yeah,
always said,
yeah,
where are you, where you want to go, how we're going to get you there.
yeah,
Always talked about small changes,
yes,
building on them, trying to get things like that. So
yeah,
it's always fine to do that.
yeah.
So why is it that we often fail to actually do the work?
Yeah, really interesting. And we know that we fail because we've got the data, and we've often said it before, all those New Year's resolutions. We know 70% of people who really want to change within
Fall
three
over.
weeks have fallen over. So this is not, an uncommon. Um, and we also know anecdotally, and we also know from our own experiences
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
I remember when you wanted to run a marathon, that stuff, and
Oh
but
yes,
you
and didn't
didn't
want to.
really want to do the training. And I
No.
also said I was only ever doing incidental exercise 'cause I was too bored with the structure. So we know all about this. So the reason we were going to fail before we even started was that we had no systems in place, really.
Yeah.
Okay.
So ultimately, you have to have a system, which is your habits, routines, and
Yes.
rituals. Because if you don't have a
Yes.
system, you'll never do the thing. I mean, it's like going to work and just sitting there in front of a computer and expecting the
Yeah.
work to do itself. Unless you
Yeah.
have
Some
a
sort
like,
of plan. Yeah.
unless you have a plan, you're
Yeah.
not actually going to do anything. And I think that's a lot of, we talk about, it's very evident now especially in
Mm.
online, about people who are neurodivergent, that unless they have a
Yes.
plan, they won't actually get anything done.
I think you work with someone neurodivergent, don't you? So the fact is, I'm probably more interested in this than many people. And when you think about how we work so differently, and I know we do, you're less interested probably in habits and routines because you've always had them,
They're
and
probably
they've
more
served
innate
you.
to me.
Yes,
Yeah.
they've
Yeah.
served you well. Whereas I've really had to cultivate them because
Yeah.
they bore my brain.
I think I've
My
always been
brain's
able.
really silly.
Yeah, my brain works on a guilt
Yeah.
mechanism, which is if you don't do. It's
Well,
true.
who's to know if which one's the best? But yes,
Yeah,
I get it.
but like, when so
You would have been a teacher's dream.
I was
Yeah, I
shocking.
was always looking for how to confound the teacher, whereas you
Yeah.
would have been wanting to please her. So
Oh, I'm
yes,
such a
and
people
it.
pleaser.
Well, I think there's some of that's innate. Watching my
Do you think that comes from being a teacher's child as well?
I wonder. I've got this tiny granddaughter, is unfolding, and it is really interesting because I do think there's so many innate characteristics that we don't
Yeah.
we don't talk about. But anyway, so what I got interested in, I suppose, was what the difference was. So, what is the difference between habits, routines, and rituals? So, habits bore the pants off me in a sense because we all know what a habit is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's defined, interestingly. So, what I call habits are actually routines often. Habits are autopilot things. So, they're
Yeah.
things you set up in a sequence, maybe,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
then you do them so often that they become autopilot. And obviously, driving your car is a really good example. So, you can drive your car, listen to the radio, and not think about what gear you're in because you're on that habit autopilot
Yeah.
pathway in your brain.
Yeah.
So that's a proper habit.
Mhm.
But if you're talking about setting up routines that serve you, of course, habits cannot serve you as well as can routines. You may maybe
Yeah.
go to the pub every day after work. That's maybe a
A
routine that
bad habit.
doesn't serve you. Or you might not do it on autopilot, but you'll definitely have that sort of trigger that you leave work and the pub opposite and you meet your friend, whatever.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's the sort of routine. So I have routines, we all do, and they serve me well, but they're not autopilot. So
Did I ever
they
tell you about my autopilot bad habit actually?
no, go for it. I love
No, I realized a few years ago that I have a trigger that is
yeah,
from childhood.
yeah,
So my parents are the youngest of of the family.
Yeah.
Both of them are the youngest in their families,
Okay.
and there was a huge age gap between
Right.
them and their siblings, which meant
Yeah.
that there was older relatives growing
Yes.
up. They were often poorly. And
Yeah.
we did a lot of hospital visiting, which is, when you look
How
back at all of
funny.
this stuff, isn't it
Yeah.
funny how I ended up in health?
Yeah. How funny.
Anyway,
Yeah.
um,
It's not
one of the
that funny, actually. It's probably a trigger as to why you became a carer. But anyway, go on.
yeah, I think it probably is. Anyway, one of the things that we often did, or we always did, was after spending a long time at the hospital for, XYZ
Yeah.
relative who was either getting
Yeah.
better or not,
Yeah.
we always had fish and chips for tea, right? We did. And it was a very ingrained
Yes,
routine.
how funny. Because your mother didn't want to prepare on
Well, it
that
wasn't
day.
her
Because
house because
yes,
we were often
in
in
someone
someone
else's
else's house,
house.
and there was a bigger, there was myself and my sister, and
Yeah.
then my cousins and
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
rest of it,
yeah.
and
How
yeah.
interesting.
So, wouldn't it surprise you to know that
Yeah,
one?
yeah.
Now this is probably
Bad habit. Yeah,
about 5, 6 years ago.
yeah,
I got a phone call and I was with my children and we were coming home from somewhere.
yeah.
And I got a phone call to say that somebody had passed away. Somebody
Yes.
who was an elderly
Yeah.
relative.
Okay. You
Do you
stopped at
know,
the fish and
stopped at the
chip
fish and chip
shop.
shop, bought fish and chips for tea, got home,
Okay.
opened the wrapping paper on the table, started to eat. First
Yeah.
bite, and I thought, "Oh, this is why I am doing this." And it was total autopilot. I hadn't
Isn't that
even considered.
funny? Yeah.
And so now I know. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing or I want to change it either.
No, 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 no.
Um,
Well, you don't get enough relatives passing away for it
to
to be
be
a real problem, do you?
not,
Unless you transfer that to every stressor in your life,
yeah,
in which case you
exactly.
could eat a lot of fish and chips.
Yeah, but I just found it
Yeah, it's
absolutely
really interesting.
fascinating. Yeah, so there you go.
Okay, so that's about the triggers. So the habits are silently triggered, I suppose,
Yeah,
on an autopilot path. And they'd never start that way. They usually start as some sort of routines.
yeah, which you can see from that,
Yeah,
can't you? That was
yeah,
definitely like a
exactly.
thing.
So I have a routine of taking a tablet every morning when I wake up, and that has become a habit, an
Yeah.
autopilot. But the negative bit of that, I think, is that you can't remember if you've taken it.
Yes. Now
So
that
there's
is
some
also,
autopilot stuff that's not great. So you can't
yeah,
remember driving from A to B. It doesn't mean you didn't drive well or
or
but
safely.
but you might get the other thing is you might get somewhere you didn't mean to go because you always go that way.
Oh
I've
yeah,
done
how
that
many times have you
before.
driven to
Yeah,
work when you don't
yeah.
work there anymore?
That
Yep.
that sort of thing. So you're on autopilot and then you go, "Oh God, I didn't mean to do that." Okay, so that's autopilot habits. We're not going to talk much more about that. It's really boring. And we've talked about it many times before, although some of our listeners might be more interested. And then the routines are much more flexible and they can be varied. So you've got a routine in the morning of, I don't know, getting dressed before you go out, maybe. I mean, most of us do. I
Most of us
do.
get dressed before we
Yeah,
go out. Yeah.
I have been caught in my pajamas around here because there's nobody here.
Hmm.
But, so those are the routines of life. They sort of set, aren't they? But you
Yeah.
can vary them. So maybe you don't shower today because you had a bath last night, or maybe so you think about it, you make a choice. It's a routine, but you don't. It's
Do
it's
it
not
for a
that
particular reason.
autopilot thing. So
Yeah.
this is
Okay.
becoming really clear now, isn't it? So
Yeah.
habits and routines, I'm sort of really happy with, and I don't want to say too much more.
Okay.
But what I got really interested in
Mhm.
was I have goals up my sleeve like you do, I'm sure,
Mhm.
that I've toyed with for a long time and just haven't got there. And I
Mm.
thought, this business of rituals really interests me. Maybe it interests me more as I've got older. But rituals are very different.
Mm.
So habits and routines are goal orientated. That is the thing. They
Okay. So
are.
you want something.
Yes, there's systems that are set up to give you a certain. So, for instance, if you, I don't know, think about getting up, clean your teeth, whatever you do, it's an efficiency thing. It's
Yeah.
really because if you haven't got any routines, and maybe this was true of you when you were, I don't know, 16 or whatever. Life makes you have routines as you get older. That's sort of
Mm.
what happens. It
Mm.
imposes routines because it gets so inefficient, especially if you have children.
Mm,
that you literally can't get out the door. That's what happened to me. I was very inefficient in that I hated the whole boring routine business
mm.
until more and more I realized if I didn't make some efficient routines, I would be actually not getting any me time. So that's how it worked for me. Okay. And that's how it works for lots of people. But then I thought about recent goals that I've had. I'm sure you've got a few too. But you can apply these systems to these goals and see where rituals fit in and whether they're of any interest to you, right?
Mhm.
So, two sort of goals I've had recently. One is every time I take the rubbish up our very long drive,
Yes, and it is
I
very long.
think, for goodness sake, how can two people make this amount of rubbish? And the problem is that I go and I shop in supermarkets often because you get everything in one place. So we then buy tomatoes in a plastic pot. We buy cucumbers with plastic wrappers. You know what I mean? If
Mhm.
I go to the local market, however, which I love and do go some of the time, I don't
Mm.
get all the wrapping. I get some brown paper bags,
Mhm.
and I love it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
land up carrying all that stuff up the drive. So,
yeah.
so what sort of system do I put in place to get to this goal of having less rubbish? So this is very easy. It's pretty systematic, right? All you need to do, and this is about routines. This isn't about rituals. So this is not
Okay.
a ritual. This is that nice little routine that says you have to think about this. You have to stop thoughtlessly and mindlessly buying things in packets. You have to look around. Even in a supermarket, you can make choices about weighing your own stuff and
Mm, of
taking your
course you
own
can.
bags.
Yeah.
Half the time, I haven't got the little bags because I have left them in the car or they're at home. So I can't put the carrots in a bag, and my supermarket doesn't provide bags,
Thanks. Yeah.
that sort of thing. Okay, so I can fix that with a routine that then hopefully eventually becomes autopilot.
Yeah.
So I then don't think about it. I just never buy tomatoes in a box, right?
Right.
Okay. So that's an easy application of habits and routines. Um, but what about this other goal of mine, which is I'd really like to set up a system of writing about my life in a systematic way
Okay.
every morning. And you know, I've done this a few times.
Yeah.
I've made pokes at it.
Yeah.
It lasts a little while, and then I think, oh, I'll go to the beach rather, or I need a coffee and meditation this morning. I can't. I haven't got the creative juices. I'm very good at not having creative juices when I need them because my brain's lazy, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, that. And you know that because you try to get creative stuff out of me when I'm sort of not in the giving mood. And what I've just listened to an interesting book. I went through my Audible and looking for books I hadn't actually read and or listened to. And there was one about exactly this, about setting up creative spaces that you then trigger yourself. So it's a bit of a mind game, really. So let's talk about rituals first of all.
Yeah, go on then. What's a ritual?
The other thing we should say about the habits and the what do you call them, routines, is that also you become part of a tribe. Did you know that? So
Oh,
there's that tribal thing. So you part of a tribe of people who care about waste.
okay. Yes, I see
So
what you mean. Yeah.
if all your friends care about waste and they talk about it, you feel slightly guilty if you don't care about it, and it's quite influential.
Mm, mm.
And rituals are very
Okay.
different. And I really like them. And I'm really keen to try lots more. So when you think of rituals, what do you think of? Do you think of anything?
I mean, I do. I think of all sorts of rituals. I mean, I often think about like the processes that people do that are sort of cultural. Like there's a
Yes.
Japanese tea ceremony
Yeah,
ritual, isn't there?
yes,
Things like that.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that's a really good example of it's a true ritual, the Japanese tea ceremony,
Yeah.
because it's not goal orientated. So you might get a cup of tea out of it,
Yeah,
but
but it's
that's
all about
not
the
the
way that you
goal.
make the tea and the
Exactly. So it's really prescribed, it's very pedantic.
yeah.
It can take up to 4 hours, who knew?
4 hours to get a cup of tea. Oh,
It's,
no thanks.
yeah, but it's not about the tea.
I know.
It's a bit like, I mean, from church services, it's a bit like setting up a sacred place
Yeah.
with rituals that allow people to get into a space where they then allow their mindset to begin to be reflective in a way that isn't goal orientated. So a lot
Okay.
of our lives are really goal orientated. We're always thinking about goals, how to fit more in, how to do stuff. But very
Yeah.
rarely, I suspect, in the modern world, do we think about rituals. We all do some rituals, by the way. And remember, I grew up in a church. I mean,
Mhm.
my childhood was spent in those pews. But what was really interesting was that I, as an adult, absolutely love choral music and I love
Mm.
the services, which I got by osmosis, and I can tell you what, I was not mindful.
Mm.
So those services in the church I went to, if I hear the chants of the replies, I
Yeah.
can do them all off pat. Not only that, they are hugely nostalgic and reassuring for me in a way that I can't really explain. So
Mm.
even though I don't buy into some of the church's philosophies or whatever, those triggering rituals, and this is what a ritual is really, is incredibly comforting in a way that I would never have understood. Okay.
Okay.
You do it with I watch my grandchild. You do it to babies. These rituals are the beginning of patterning of a wild animal, really. So,
Yes. Yeah.
so you want this little wild animal to go to bed at a certain time because that's how you want them to fit into your life. And so
Oh,
you
yes.
start
Yeah.
the bedtime ritual around, the bath, the whatever you decide,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the
Oh, yes. Yeah.
storybooks, and it's that familiarity, exactly the same as a church service, that you're giving this child the ritual that then begins to allow their sort of their brain to relax into the familiarity. You can read the same book, by the way, every day.
Oh, I did. I did read the same book every day for months.
Those are part of that ritual that triggers the baby into thinking, "Oh, I've been here before." This is the
Yeah.
release bit. So you're sort of
Yeah.
giving them a release.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's where it differs. It's rituals are things that you give deeper meaning to. So it's
Yeah.
not about the tea and it's not about the storybook. It's
No.
the
It's
deeper meaning is I'm getting you into a space, or I'm getting myself into a space, which allows me to be more creative, more reflective. It's
yeah.
literally carving space out of your
Yeah.
life. So I want to write every morning. It's so easy, this when you know.
Mm.
All I have to do is set up the routines that allow me to make a ritual that gives me that creative space. So I'd have to set the alarm because I'm not going to do this otherwise. So maybe I have to set the alarm for half an hour earlier because I've already then carved time out of my life.
Mm.
And then I've got to have a really tidy space where I go to write. I tend to write in my kitchen, actually.
Mm.
So I need to have set that up the night before. It's not good enough to wake up and have to go and find all my stuff and
Yeah.
then move everything off the kitchen table. And that's
Mm.
one of the reasons I'm not creative. Is sometimes there's too much mess around me and therefore the mess is potentially takes priority. So
Oh,
you
I agree with
endless
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you're
You can't
endlessly cleaning up the mess and you can't do your sewing because you can't sew in a mess. So this is one of my issues. My
yeah.
brain really
Yeah.
doesn't like
I can't I can't
mess.
I can't do that. I can't do
Yeah.
music if the
Yes, music,
playroom
great.
is
Yeah.
in a mess.
So whether you're a painter, a writer, a musician, or just want to contemplate life, any
Mm.
of it really,
Yeah.
you need to set the systems up. And the systems are sort of ritualistic. And
Mm.
maybe you always wear the same dressing gown. I mean, there's all sorts of connotations. You could light a candle, actually. Lots of people light a candle. So that
Yeah.
signifies the beginning of that space.
Mm.
Maybe you make tea with leaves, which is what I do, in a pot. And
Mm.
that little ritual of making the tea becomes part of your ritual. So now I'm
Mm.
saying to my brain, okay, I know you didn't want to get up early. I know you'd rather actually go to the beach, but this is the sacred ritual time that is
Mm.
now going to give you what you actually want in life, which is to
Mm.
produce this bit of writing. And I really do want that. But
Yeah.
without the systems, I've been contemplating this for 3 years,
Yeah.
maybe
I
longer
think I
actually.
think you're right. I think ultimately when you want to open your mind to do something a little bit
Yeah.
more creative, which we all do in different ways, as you said, whether
Yes,
it be
exactly.
writing
You've got
or
to find
painting
your
or
way.
yeah,
Yeah.
but actually it's incredibly easy for our minds to be put off. All that
Yeah.
needs to happen
Yeah.
is I'm going to sit down and play something, but the doorbell rings and that's
Yes.
it. Now I haven't
Yeah,
got,
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're
you can't do that
distracted. Your
now.
brain is now in another sphere.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you want to sit down and be creative or be do a
Yes.
particular thing in a rich, in that kind of way, it's almost like people say, everything has to align. Well, yes, it kind of does. You have to
But
have
you
that.
have to make it align.
You
And I
have to make
think,
it align, yeah.
yeah,
Which
and
is
I
why I
think,
think so many authors have a bolt hole at the bottom of their
yes,
garden.
yes, almost
Um,
all writers you talk to, they
yeah,
don't. I used to think writers just sat and spewed their stuff
on a
on a,
page.
yes, because I thought that's what they did. But lo
Mm,
and behold, they're just like you and me.
mm,
They write for a living. It's really hard
yeah,
because they have to make those rituals. So yes, you're right. Some of them will have a garden room space, or but they'll almost all have rituals around the writing.
yeah.
They'll write at a certain time of day. They'll set themselves funny little goals to make themselves write the next page. I thought it was just came out of your creative juices. Who knew? So if you're going
Well,
to
do you
wait
know
for your creative juices,
you'll be
you're going
waiting a
to
really
wait a
long
long
time.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
there's far more discipline involved in that kind of thing than we
Yes.
give it
And
credit for.
music is the same. You have to, if you write music for a living, it's not good enough to wait for inspiration. I mean, you will
No.
get some
You
inspiration
will you will
and
get
yes,
inspiration and you have to record the inspiration when you
yes.
get it.
And you have to
But
have a
you can't
notebook and you have to, have the facility.
yeah, yeah, you do. But
Yeah.
I don't think it's you kind of build the habit by you build the skill by completing the
Yes,
habit by doing this stuff.
exactly.
And it's what it's like when you sit down to kind of write a podcast script or when we're
Yes,
literature
which
research,
I've
you
done
we
today.
have to
Yeah.
wade through the mire sometimes
Yes,
to
to
get to
get
the
to
bits we want to say. Yeah.
and this is exactly what we've done today. But once I get to that interesting bit, I'm off because I
Yes.
really do enjoy it. And
Okay.
I've loved looking at rituals and I've loved understanding for the first time in my life, which is really hard to admit,
Mm.
that, you and I have never been very good at mindfulness practices, have we, in our past life?
No, we're not good at
Well, we're
stopping
not
and
good at
allowing ourselves to
just
be
saying that we're
mindful.
going to be mindful.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So
But
it's
what I
hard.
realize is that the mindful practices are the
Enable you to
ritual.
be in the ritual. Yeah.
Exactly. They the
So
ritual, aren't they?
so what are we saying then? We need rituals for what purpose to what to
Yes.
our health?
Well, I think rituals is another thing to try to add to your autopilot habits and your sequence routines. That's sort of what
Mhm.
those are.
Mhm.
If you added some ritual, I think it gives you a whole nother dimension of making something happen. And I don't mean that's the goal. And so there are goals, but it's the goal for you is unique. And the ritual is all about carving the place, the time, the trigger for
Mm.
you to use. So I think I'll sit down, maybe I'll light a candle, I'm not sure yet.
Just don't be
Um
like me and light the candle and leave the house and come back later and realize that you could have been an accidental arsonist. That's what I did yesterday.
Did you? Oh, there
Yep.
you go. So that's
3
one thing.
hours later, I got home and I thought, "Golly, the house smells really lovely. Oh, I left the candle on."
So I think if I just say to myself, it's a bit like, athletes. often I listen to them about training, and
Yeah.
they say, in fact, in the book I was listening to, the woman who writes the book says she goes to the gym at 5:30 every morning. She lives in somewhere like Manhattan, right? And the only way she can
Okay.
do it, because she doesn't really want to go, is
Mm.
she has a ritual by which she uh, phones a taxi the night before that picks her
Mm.
up. I mean, this is not for everybody. What I mean is, she says, once I commit to phoning the taxi, I'm already in the gym and done the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
the ritual that allows you. I mean, it's a slightly different take on ritual, but
So, well, I think you can use it in anything, can't you? So,
yes,
say, for example,
exactly.
you want to improve the quality of your diet. And
Yes,
in order to do that, you want to rely less on convenience foods and
yes,
you want more
yeah.
whole
So
foods.
that's the goal.
That's the
Yeah,
goal, but the
yeah,
ritual might be in cleaning the kitchen to have the
yeah,
space for the preparation that you need to do, because actually that is half the battle. I mean, if you don't have space to get
yeah.
your chopping board out and start doing
And start
the
enjoying the
prep
chopping board. You
and
see.
enjoy yeah, and it might be that you get
Yes, I
your
love
phone
that.
out and you listen to a particular
Yes,
podcast
yes,
or
exactly.
a playlist or whatever it
Yes,
is that kind of inspires you. So that's the kind of
yes,
thing that
I
might
love it.
work,
And it sets you up with that space to enjoy something not for the goal, but for
but
the
to enjoy the
journey. I hate
process.
the word
Naturally,
journey,
but
but
then no,
the
but if you enjoy
process.
the
Yeah.
process of doing something,
Yes,
then it becomes entangled up in the reward. So
exactly.
and I think
Yes.
cooking is a really good example, because actually if you want to eat better and you
You've
want to
got
enjoy the food
to
you've eaten,
cook.
part of the process is enjoying the cooking process.
Yes,
And even if it's
exactly.
something really simple, you're learning a
Yeah.
new skill,
Making a
you're,
salad or,
you
yeah.
know, shopping can be very therapeutic.
No, absolutely.
Mm,
So, I have a family member who's very keen on beautiful Japanese knives,
mm,
and he did buy me one. And he's always quite appalled at my lack of care of this knife. He taught me really carefully yesterday how to sharpen a knife on a stone.
mm,
And it is a mindful thing to do.
mm,
So, what I mean is that the process of sharpening that knife is so satisfying. And
mm.
then to chop up vegetables with a sharp knife on a scrubbed board, I can't tell you how much joy that is. That's a ritual, really.
The time to invest in
Yes,
that
about
and
caring for
slowing down
yourself.
and caring
Yes.
throughout the whole
Yeah,
process.
yeah, yeah.
I think ultimately, actually, out of everything that we've talked about today, I think that's the main driver
Yes,
is
yes.
don't do things in a hurry. It's about slowing down, doing
And
them properly
yes, doing them for you and caring
and
about the
enjoying the
process. Yeah.
process.
And you can apply rituals, I think, to lots of bits of your life. Getting home from work and chopping fresh vegetables. You can really do it in a ritualistic way that allows you a bit of release time for your
Yeah,
brain. A modern world which really doesn't have a lot of that. Can you imagine
yeah.
years and years ago, lots of people didn't even live in urban environments. So the rituals of life were very much there. They
Mm,
had to, I don't know, feed the hens. And it's not mindless, this stuff, because it is very mindful. And
mm,
that's the
mm,
difference between habits, routines, and rituals. And I'm really keen to explore more about using rituals for me to
mm.
add that other dimension that then stops me being able to get out of things.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I'm sort of thinking
For the
if I
creativity.
make something sacrosanct,
Yeah.
it will help. And now I see why I absolutely love chanting, choral music, and quite a lot of other rituals that I never realized were in my brain and trigger a degree of comfort, reassurance, nostalgia,
Mm,
time away from watching Channel 4 News and getting really depressed. Mm.
exactly. I
Anyway,
agree.
that's
I agree
another
with you.
podcast. Right. Nice to speak to you. That was
Well,
my
I have to go and set
latest.
up a ritual for feeding the cat now.
You
He's
see,
coming.
you feed the cat. It is a habit because the cat reminds you if you don't. But
Yeah.
it's not a habit in the autopilot way. It's
No,
more
well,
it's more a routine where you
the
have
trouble
to
in
feed
our
the
house
cat.
is that it's not meant to be me that's feeding the cat, is it?
Well, now there's a thing. Yeah, let's not go there.
Let's
The
not talk
dog is
about who it's
also
meant to be.
fed by me in this house, but yeah,
Yeah.
let's not
Anyway,
go there. Yeah.
I'll speak to you
Well,
soon.
yeah, speak to you soon. Bye for now.
Bye.